Given their very nature, horror movies are so often brimming with kills, with some of the greatest films in the genre being home to some of horror's most memorable and iconic death sequences. Still, it doesn't always take a great horror movie to house a great death, and so many dud horror pictures have at least managed to deliver one or two decent kills. Granted, those kills weren't enough to save these stinkers, but they at least gave us something to enjoy, even if it was only for a couple of minutes. So with that in mind, I'm Andrew from What Culture Horror, and here are awful horror movies with one brilliant kill. Mia, Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2. Blood and Honey 2 exists in this really weird space, where it's so vastly better than the first movie, but it's still, not that great. Thankfully, as part of the bigger budget here, Pooh 2 does at least have some pretty badass character designs, with our villains feeling like mutated beasts rather than just a bloke with a mask on. Also, there's plenty more gore this time out, with one particularly brutal death coming in the film's opening moments. Their 3 friends are attacked in the 100-acre wood, and it doesn't go well for any of them. Of course it doesn't. To be fair, all 3 kills here are pretty fun, but the most impressive is a character called Mia, who Pooh basically breaks all of her limbs, hitting some curb stomps that even Seth Rollins will be proud of. Hey, wrestling fans. Not content with just that though, Pooh then sticks Mia's head in a bear trap and finishes the job in horrific fashion. The Bear, Bloody New Year. Norman J. Warren's Bloody New Year is a weird movie. This straight-to-video 1987 film centers on a group of young adults stranded on a small island where they just so happen to find the haunted Grand Island Hotel. Why this is such an odd movie? Well, that's because there aren't any real scares across Bloody New Year's runtime. Sure, our core characters are chased by 3 angry locals, but the way the characters react to any such threats, it's just in a very lackadaisical way, which means it's hard to really get invested here. And when the kills do come, they're all a bit lame and or bizarre. Seriously, someone dies from a scratch to the face, then someone else is punched through the stomach and becomes some kind of borderline zombie thing. Yep, this is certainly something. Anyway, that half a zombie person does at least give us a decent kill when they target a fella called Bear, one of the angry locals who've been chasing them, who not only gets their head completely turned around, but they have that done twice, giving us a very memorable double head twist. Rocco, Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2. Best known for that garbage day meme that does the rounds every now and again, Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2 is an unforgettable rehash of the first movie. And by rehash, that doesn't mean a few similar plot points. Nope. Part 2's first 40 minutes are literally footage from the first film. Now, that first film is Billy Chapman on a festive murder spree after witnessing his parents being killed by a Santa years prior. In Part 2, it's Billy's younger brother Ricky on his own Christmas killing quest due to PTSD from the events of the first movie. With that PTSD explored here, we lazily revisit the events of the original picture. In fact, there was at one point a plan for Part 2 to simply reshuffle the footage from the first film, which should tell you all you need to know about the effort put into this sequel. Still, one genuine highlight here is the death of Lone Shark Rocco, who Ricky confronts in an alleyway, stabs him through the chest with an umbrella, and then, quite geniusly, opens that umbrella up for a fantastic visual. Mrs. Ferguson, Jaws the Revenge. It's a total guilty pleasure of yours truly, but Jaws the Revenge has so many obvious problems. For starters, there's the "this time it's personal" tagline of the film, meaning the shark that bafflingly stalks Ellen Brody from Amityville to the Bahamas, it somehow is part of the long-standing beef with the Brody family and sharks generally, even though every shark in the previous films were destroyed. Yep, makes no sense. There's the illogicality of this shark thriving in the warm waters of the Atlantic. The shark takes down a freaking seaplane at one point, and Ellen has some sort of psychic bond and connection with the shark, and that is all just the tip of the iceberg here. One of Jaws the Revenge's standout moments though is the banana boat death of a character listed as Mrs. Ferguson. This comes when Ellen's granddaughter Thea is on that same banana boat, with a genuine sense of dread momentarily when we see the great white shark's dorsal fin heading towards their youngster, a moment only amplified by a phenomenal performance from Karen Young as Carla Brody, watching on from the beach as her daughter nearly becomes shark chow. But instead, it's poor Mrs. Ferguson who bites the bullet here. Juliet. Slumber Party Massacre 3. While the original Slumber Party Massacre was cheesy but entertaining, and the second film went balls to the wall in basically being a musical, Slumber Party Massacre 3 is as dull and generic a slasher movie as you'd expect from a film released in 1990, way after that subgenre had long peaked. We again have a drill-wielding mystery killer on the loose here, although one victim not killed by that drill is Lulu Wilson's Juliet. Now, we'd find out that Juliet's boyfriend Ken is the mystery murderer here, and she found that out the hard way. Having had sex with Ken, Juliet decides to take a bath, where she randomly discovers a sex toy in the bathroom. She probably clarifies, well, this is somebody else's house, so that's a little bit creepy. But not just that, but this sex toy is, well, plugged into a wall, which nicely leads to the killer throwing this toy in the bath and electrocuting Juliet to death. Joe, The Strangers Chapter 1. Oh man, what a disappointment. Brian Bertino's The Strangers is such a great, tense, disturbing movie, and sure, Johannes Roberts' The Strangers Pray at Night was a little so-so, but that still had plenty going for it. Not least that neon-soaked swimming pool sequence, you know the one, Total Eclipse of the Heart, fantastic stuff. So, being the ever-optimist that I am, I was hoping for something really good from Rennie Harlin's Strangers trilogy, but yeesh, did The Strangers Chapter 1 prove to be a bit of a stinker when it released last year. This was just a soulless retread of so many plot points of the original film. A couple in a remote cabin, tormented by the franchise's 3 masked killers, and even the ending ripped off the original, with our male protagonist killed, the female just about surviving, despite being left for dead. Still, there was one jarring, in a good way, kill at Chapter 1's midpoint. That'd be Joe, the owner of the property Ryan and Maya are staying at. This comes at a point when our masked killers have very much made their presence known, tormenting these lovebirds and finally bringing at least a little bit of tension to the film. With Ryan having a shotgun to hand, he slowly edges round a corner, fatally shooting what he believes to be one of the killers. Seriously, he blows half the poor fella's face off. It's a very interesting, fun visual. But yeah, that's pretty much the only highlight of such a disappointing movie. With The Strangers Chapter 2 and Chapter 3 filmed at the same time as Chapter 1, it's no real surprise that Chapter 2's intended release date of late 2024, that has been delayed, and there is now massive uncertainty about when both of those films will be released. Calvin Covington, Children of the Corn, the 11th Children of the Corn movie, is pretty poor. But let's be fair, a couple of very solid performances from some of the younger cast here. And as part of that cast, it's Kate Moyer as Eden Edwards, the leader of the film's murderous kids cult. One person immediately on Kate's hit list is Calvin Covington, one of the adults of the small Nebraska town who is, well, I don't know if I can say this on this video because it might get demonetized, but he's a dick. He's a bit of a dick. It's implied that Calvin beats his kids. He mocks the rest of the town's children, and he absolutely is against those kiddos having any sort of say in their own future, or for the future of the town and its industry. And when Calvin bites the dust, it's actually really impactful, briefly setting a nice tone for the movie before things, of course, obviously go sadly off a cliff. That death comes under the orders of Eden, of course, and we see a rope attached to a horse that's also attached to Calvin's neck, with the scene playing out as an elaborate hanging, all as Eden just calmly eats an apple before casually walks off with a horse, in turn snapping Calvin's neck. Mike, Hostel Part 3. The first 2 Hostel movies, they do have their fair share of problems, but that is nothing compared to the rough, straight-to-video Hostel Part 3. Changing up the formula a little here, Part 3 takes place in Las Vegas and revolves around a group of guys on a stag party, or bachelor party for those outside the UK. And yes, that group end up in the clutches of the elite hunting group, who have a place in Vegas these days and actually take bets on how each kill is going to play out. In Mike, we not only have the first kill of this threequel, but we also have easily its best, with Mike having his face cut off and turned into a mask. Part 3's kills aren't quite as gory and gratuitous as the other 2 films, but Mike's demise still stands as one of the better in the 3-picture franchise. It's just a shame about the rest of the movie. Harold Bradley, Home Sweet Home. In this 1981 picture, beefy fitness expert Jake Steinfeld, the uncle of Hawkeye's Haley as it happens, plays Jay Jones, an escaped mental patient and drug addict who's got a thirst for blood. Jay winds up terrorizing a family on Thanksgiving, and yep, it's as generic gets. Proper paper-thin stuff here when it comes to plot. However, there is one really fun and, let's face it, pretty just outright ridiculous scene here, where Jay kills a fella called Harold Bradley. You see, Howard made the mistake of siphoning fuel from the car Jay stole stolen and trying to steal the car's battery. Once he realizes what's happened, Jay appears from out of nowhere, jumping onto the car bonnet with a frog splash you'd see from an Eddie Guerrero or a Rob Van Dam, again here with the wrestling. Anyway, with that, Harold ends up squished to death in gloriously cheesy, very ridiculous fashion. Melissa Kitt, Black Christmas 2006. As someone who, for full disclosure here, took a sick day from work to go and watch the 2006 Black Christmas in the cinema back in the day, I feel absolutely justified to label this film a total piece of trash. Seriously, what was with all the eye stuff? Nah, no thanks, not for me. This loose remake of the 1974 classic just tries too hard, throwing way too much gore out there just for the sake of gore, having big expedition dumps, and just generally explaining away so much of the mystery that made the original work so well. And that's a shame. The film actually has a fairly solid cast, including Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Katie Cassidy, Crystal Lowe, Karen Conner-Vail, Andrea Martin, and Michelle Trachtenberg. And it's Michelle Trachtenberg's Melissa who gets spotlighted here, with Melissa essentially scalped after Agnes throws a pair of ice skates at her head. It's a very cool visual. It's very brief, but it's a very cool visual and a highlight of an otherwise horrendous film. And Agnes, that would be the sister of Billy Lenz, but also Billy's daughter at the same time, because yes, not just is there lots of eye stuff here, but this remake decides to throw in some forced incest just for good measure. Again, nah man, not for me thanks. David Van Etten, Lost Boys, The Tribe. Joel Schumacher's The Lost Boys is a truly perfect picture, serving as a great time capsule of late 80s cinema, overflowing with fun performances, insta-quotable dialogue, and a soundtrack that holds up to this day as an all-timer. So, when a sequel finally turned up in 2008, fans of the original weren't sure what to expect from The Tribe. For those who've seen that sequel, or the third movie, The Thirst, yep, the end result is a hollow shell of that 1987 original. To the credit of The Tribe though, it does at least start off on the right foot. There, the legendary Tom Savini plays David Van Etten, a wealthy vampire who has his own private beach, and who's butted heads with some surfers dabbling in his water. Of course, these surfers end up being a bunch of vampires too, as led by Angus Sutherland's Shane, and Savini's character is soon turned to shreds and decapitated after getting a little too cocky with these young bloodsuckers. Loretta, Leprechaun 3. Taking the action to the bright lights of Las Vegas, Leprechaun 3 has Warwick Davis's rogue encounter the body-conscious Loretta, and with a magic gold coin in her possession, Loretta wishes to be young and beautiful, and so her lips pucker, her breasts grow bigger, and her backside likewise expands. However, when Loretta tries to exit the room, her bloated body explodes when her backside is pierced by the door handle. All while the Leprechaun, yep, he imaginatively rhymes slut with butt as all this plays out. Yep, you stay classy, Lep. Hannah, Go Away! Released in 2024, Go Away is a rough movie, centering on a family home targeted by a group of masked intruders, only for one of the family to also have their own murky little secret. Most notably for longtime horror fans, Go Away features Tom Matthews of Tommy Jarvis fame, with Tuesday Night from Elm Street 4, and the absolute star of the show here is the brilliant Felissa Rose. Granted, Jerome Chrétien does a decent enough job as the leader of these intruders, but other than that, Go Away can be a bit of a slog. However, we do have one very decent kill here, with that being the demise of Daniel Mesmer's Hannah. After being told to pick a card that will decide what body part she'll have cut off, Hannah refuses, resulting in Dealer's Choice coming to the fore and her face being selected for removal. And that's exactly what happens in brutal, bloody fashion. Considering Go Away's minuscule budget, it definitely deserves props for this particular sequence. Oh, and also again for the performance of Felissa Rose. Very good, very sweary, it's fantastic. Dr. Gwen Holbrook, A Nightmare on Elm Street 2010. The worst remake of all time? Yeah, quite possibly. Still, the 2000 take on A Nightmare on Elm Street did have one impressive kill going for it at least. Following the loose narrative of the 1984 original, just, you know, without the practical effects charm or the uniqueness of Wes Craven's movie, the remake mirrors that original in how Nancy's mother is killed in its closing minutes. Here, it's Connie Britton as Gwen Holbrook in that mother role. And just when we're supposed to think all's well and Freddy has been thwarted, Nancy witnesses her mother brutally slaughtered by Freddy, him appearing in a mirror and running his blades through the back of Gwen's head and out through her eyes. A very, very nice kill, but still, it's housed in an absolute stinker of a movie. John Strode, Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers. There are some truly horrendous movies in the Halloween franchise, and one of the very, very worst is Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers, likely only beaten out by The Revenge of Michael Myers and Halloween Resurrection when it comes to the stinker stakes. One thing The Curse of Michael Michael Myers does have going for it though is seeing creepy prick John Strode get a nice dose of comeuppance courtesy of Michael. The uncle of franchise fave Laurie Strode, John is an abusive, aggressive, alcoholic a-hole, an a-hole who moved his family into the infamous Myers house without even making them aware of what horrors had actually gone on there years before. He also berates his wife, he hates his daughter Cara, and he even has beef with his young grandson. So when John arrives home to an empty house on Halloween night, he pours a whiskey, rants to himself, and heads to the basement to fix an apparent power outage, where he's there stabbed by Michael and pinned to a fuse box, electrocuted to the point his head explodes. You love to see it. Molly and Dana, Mouse of Horrors. With a bunch of Steamboat Willie-inspired horror movies now in various stages of development, and let's be honest, looking various stages of awful, one of the first out of the trap was Mouse of Horrors. Literally, our demented killer here is actually called Steamboat Willie, although he's technically a mutated rat rather than a mouse, and yeah, the film is just really bad. However, probably the highlight of Mouse of Horrors is its opening few minutes, where we're first introduced to Willie and his crazy antics. And actually, it's a 2-for-1 sort of thing here, with two women finding themselves in Willie's crosshairs, the first of which, Molly, is gutted like a fish in front of her friend, the second of which, Dana, manages to last a little longer, running through an amusement park before being stabbed several times and just generally brutalized by Willie. And with that, Mouse of Horrors pretty much peaks with its opening couple of minutes. Adrian Thomas, Jason X. Full disclosure, I get a massive kick out of Jason X, just a fun, daft popcorn slasher that obviously does not take itself too seriously. I can also admit that, yeah, the film isn't actually, that good. In fact, it's a pretty awful movie on any sort of level. Still, Jason X did at least give us one of the greatest kills in the entire Friday the 13th franchise. Of course, yes, that would be the cold as ice murder of Adrian Thomas. With Jason Voorhees being defrosted on a spaceship 445 years in the future, which is quite the sentence in and of itself, Adrian is the person tasked with assessing Jason's supposed corpse, only for Crystal Lake's most infamous son to soon be up to his old tricks, grabbing her and shoving her head in liquid nitrogen and then smashing her frozen head to a million little bitty pieces. And with that, we get a totally badass death sequence and one of the greatest in the history of the franchise. Trina, Nightmare Beach. From Umberto Lenzi, 1988's Nightmare Beach is a fairly formulaic slasher, with a mysterious biker killing your standard pretty young things during a spring break. As the film opens, we see a biker gang leader on death row being given the electric chair, using his final words to swear bloody revenge. And so, the question is whether that biker is indeed back from the grave and behind these new murders, or is something else afoot. While Nightmare Beach is pretty forgettable, it does have one very memorable kill, that being Trina, one of the Demon's biker gang. When confronted with this killer biker, Trina, she just presumes it's her old leader back from the dead, only to be violently thrown around as the killer then yanks a live wire out of the wall, rams it into Trina's headphones, and electrocutes her in spectacular fashion. Oh, and as for who the killer is, yeah, that'll be the Bible-thumping Reverend Bates on a quest to punish the sinners of Miami. Melody, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022. When originally putting together this video, Chrissy of the very naff Texas Chainsaw Massacre The Beginning immediately came to mind. And then, then I had the misfortune of remembering, oh yeah, there was that awful 2022 film as well. And so, here we are with Melody. Played by Sarah Yarkin, Melody is one of those wealthy youngsters looking to essentially gentrify the abandoned Texas town of Harlow, where, of course, their presence causes Leatherface to once again come to the fore. And while a whole bunch of people wind up dead by the end of this most recent Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Melody and her sister Lila look like they've managed to make it out alive, setting their self-driving car to head on out of Marlow and to safety. And that's what it does, or nearly does, but not before Leatherface grabs Melody and shockingly beheads her, all as Lila is helpless to do anything about that. Also, we should probably give a shout out here to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre's bloody bus set murder spree, where Leatherface caused a lovely amount of carnage in an otherwise horrendously bad film. Deputy Hafner, I'll always know what you did last summer. By default, I have watched a lot of bad horror films over the decades, the things I do for our audience, but this hunk of junk is on an entirely different level. Seriously, there's a reason why many Last Summer fans just pretend that there's only 2 previous movies. Even the presence of genre fave Don Shanks can't save this turd, and even then, Shanks, who played Michael Myers in Halloween 5, plays a zombified version of fisherman Ben Willis, who targets a bunch of unrelated kids who've done nothing to him, hundreds of miles away from anything related to the other 2 movies. It's bad. It's really, really soul-destroyingly bad. But I'll Always Know does have one standout kill in it, with that being Deputy Hafner, one of the many characters teased as being behind these latest murders. For Hafner, he's impaled on a forklift, which looks genuinely great, plenty of blood dripping underneath him, some really nice effects work, some really nice practical effects work too, most importantly. But yeah, that's it. That's the one good thing I will ever say about this awful, awful movie.